Well, hello there.
Yeah, fancy meeting you here.
It's funny that you have a Hawaiian shirt on.
We should coordinate these things better. Because it's almost like you would think they must have gotten together and decided that today was Hawaiian Shirt Day.
And you'd be wrong.
You would be super wrong.
It's because we're such cool dudes.
Yeah, I think it's a little disturbing when you see both Hawaiian shirts.
So I got a new chair this week, and I noticed that I'm taller than you now. You need to have better posture. I'm speaking for your wife. There you go. So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we've just when you thought we had killed the topic dead of the life cycle of a ransomware incident. No, hold that thought because we have at least one more episode. We've worked our way through this diagram from CERTNZ about life cycle of ransomware and talking about the different components. And we're going to finish that off today.
I have some more detailed thoughts. I've put some time to this.
Yeah, we've chatted a bit about that, but I'll look forward to that discussion. All right, enough jibber jabber, enough chit chat. Here we go.
Let's go. I like it. Short one.
It's fast one. We're diving right in.
Best one.
All right. I think people that have seen the last three I don't think we need a ton of recap this time. We've been talking about this almost ad nauseum. Life cycle of ransomware incident, mostly because of my absolute love of this diagram.
I do really love it.
Yeah, I have considered putting a ring on the finger of this of this particular diagram. So, and I tried to fix it. You remember last time I tried marking or highlighting something and I ended up with this yellow highlighting on everything. I don't know what I've done. You would think I'd know how to work a PDF.
You broke the internet.
Yeah. But in any case, we talked through all of the initial access components. We've talked about different controls. We got into this, what they call consolidation and preparation, which I kind of think I'd prefer to call escalation. We go from our initial access to moving around, looking around, turning
a little bit into a lot.
Turning Sally in marketing into somebody in IT with more godlike access, and talked about some of the controls inside of there, and then really off into this impact on target. So impact on target. I think we got into that a little bit last time, if I remember. We certainly did the first time. We started with the end in mind, but knowing that the bad people who are coming into our networks, really for this ransomware in particular, three things that they're typically after. A relatively new one, exfiltrate the data, because that can be used to shame you or to apply pressure. Destroy the backups, so it's more likely that you'll pay ransoms because you need access back to that data. And then encrypting data on the networks to that being the primary impact that puts a business out of commission immediately. So we could talk about some of the major controls. There are only three to talk about back in here. The what do you do about it? There's this logging and alerting. It may be a little too late. If you're already the command and control lateral movement.
There it goes. Yeah.
Privilege escalation. Oh, now what? Okay, well.
We should catch it before it gets there.
Logging and alerting is going to be super helpful to let you know what you're already going to know of whoops, data's gone, backups are destroyed, data's encrypted.
So I've got a little some questions for you.
Yeah, please.
Can I ask questions? Well, so I've sat with this a little bit more, and I want to be clear, even though I'm going to be a little bit of the devil's advocate, I really like this format and the accessibility of it, but I feel like we're falling short. Because this feels like, when you look at it at first, like this is the complete picture.
This is it.
This is it. Like
this is the unified theory.
That's how I felt. Is this is the
security.
Unified. When I read it first, like this is, yes, I like the way you put that. But then as I sat with it a little bit more, the phishing, password guessing, like these are all threat vectors.
Yeah.
We're missing one or two threat vectors for malware there.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, we don't have to get it. We touched the initial access before, but misconfiguration of assets is one of the major drivers of malware, and that's not even on here. Like,
right.
How do you anyway? But we won't get into that. But so on data exfiltration around the right, I was sitting with that one for a little bit, and it didn't feel right to me that logging and alerting was
the control for data exfiltration.
It wasn't like they put 10 controls on there and Shaver's like, yeah, but there's this 11th one. They have one. And there's another simple control for data exfiltration. What about encryption at rest? Like, does that not apply here? How am I thinking about that wrong? I guess it doesn't stop them from exfiltrating data, but I feel like if the data is encrypted and the threat actor finds the encrypted data, like it's really not an attractive thing to exfiltrate.
No, I'm with you. And I think about some of my past lives in all sorts of different organizations with really sensitive data that we were responsible for. Data at rest encryption, absolutely. You would think about that as you exfiltrated my encrypted database backups, maybe. Or another one I would throw in that same vein would be tokenization of
some form of de-identification of valuable assets.
Correct. Or dare I say, I'm going to feel like a real jerk saying this out loud. Do you know where I'm going to go with this?
I don't have
maybe some data sharding.
Oh shoot! I just sharded my data. Have you ever micro sharded your data?
No, but I hear it's
the new rage.
Yeah,
all the kids are doing it.
All the cool kids are micro sharding their data. Yeah, I'm with you. I think there would be some, other than, I have logging and alerting. I have a really good sense of what data just got exfiltrated. Yeah. I think another one, I might, normally we try, you play devil's advocate and I try to defend real hard, but I'm probably going to fail at that today. I look at it's kind of funny to me where destroy backups is an option, and the thing you're supposed to do about that, the control
backups,
is called backups. And so I don't know that that's wrong, but I might want to see, is there a particular kind of backups?
Yeah, but I think there might even be something before that.
Right. Correct.
So I actually made some notes on this for you.
Ah, wonderful. Of course you did.
So being that this particular area of cybersecurity specifically is my jam.
Is your jam, yeah.
I guess I wouldn't self-destroy backups with backups. The first thing that I would do, and this is
just more backups, harder
everywhere.
Yeah.
And when they say destroy backups, I think generally that is encrypting the backups. So we're splitting hairs there.
Yeah.
Or
just deleting them.
Whatever. Yeah. So both from an academic perspective and operationally of what I see on a almost daily basis, the first thing I would do is system hardening on your backups. Like, don't name your backup server backups. Like, yeah, that's step one. Because most of the time what I get is like the server is named Veeam01 in Veeam02 in Veeam backup repository. Like, so I would like do some of that stuff first and
That's
like
probably a database server.
turn the host firewall on, follow some sys hardening guidelines, maybe create an allow list in that firewall. See, I used the right term there.
Well, I even wonder here, MFA or privileged account management or some access controls to say, don't let me just arbitrarily log into the backup server and change or destroy the backups.
So just some basic things that I see that are not done regularly.
Right.
The next point that I would make is not just backups, but that we need to focus on the immutability of the backups, and whether that's we use something like object storage that has a journaling function in it that allows us to like roll our backups back in time to a workable image, or we're actually creating some kind of, I know the term's controversial around what an air gap is and how it works, but like a one-way digital gate to rotating storage out. Like we would need to focus on that a little bit. And then the second thing,
how about offsite tape, man?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a fine option. Like especially when it comes to malware, I've never seen malware like infected
air gap over to your Iron Mountain facility. Yeah,
which I think is, I'm not going to say we need to do that because I think I've just spent the last 10 years moving people
making that go away. Right. Yeah.
But like, how do you get that capability back? Right. There's different ways of handling that.
Right.
And then, I'm a big fan of cloud redundancy. At least like getting a smidgen of your data encrypted, sitting in a pilot light in a hyperscale cloud somewhere that you can do something with it if it really gets this bad. If you've failed to contain the ransomware event to that extent, you can kind of just burn this environment down and fall back to the bunker and start your activities over from there.
Move over to the pilot light environment and
start to ignite the flame there. So I would do those. Those are my three things that I think that are kind of missing from this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that no criticism to them. They weren't trying to communicate all of that in a hexagon on, an eye chart.
Right. But I think part of why, even when we did our first wave of looking at this and saying, this is pretty cool, is it as cool as we think it is? And it is pretty cool. Let's do an episode.
It's more of it could be even cooler if.
Yeah. I think even initially we came up with some, some word choices here or there, one or two things, but I'm still, I think there's a fundamental truth and even simplicity to this thing that
so much.
adding a lot more complexity, doubling the amount of circles and boxes on this would probably not be
I think that like devalues it. I'm just saying there's a couple tweaks that I would add. What about when you go past to beyond the first pass, like what would you do? Yeah.
What about it's interesting on encrypt data. Again, we've got our logging and alerting on encrypt data. Okay. And then the other one that they've added is, I have to look carefully and see if I can tell what color it is. It's application allow listing, which I think is so rarely done, but I think is the concept of, if we had an allow list of the executables that were allowed to run in an environment, then, whatever, ransomware executable is doing this encryption would just not be allowed.
But then now we're getting to a mandatory access controls model, which I get, like architecturally, I agree. But we're not the Department of Defense either. And our systems have been architected with discretionary access controls. And that's like it's a big
leap. Jump. Yeah. That's like the world peace control
Yeah,
box
yeah.
there of
Like, you know what we should do about hunger? Feed everyone. Like,
food.
okay, cool.
Food
Right,
is the
great.
control for hunger. Yes.
Cool story, guys.
Correct.
I made some notes on that as well. Like to go, so maybe application allow listings a bit aspirational.
Yeah.
Definitely logging and alerting with some solid threat hunting behind that. That's my exception with logging and alerting is, yeah. Anyway, I won't get into that. I guess one is on destroy data is this idea of immutability and integrity control of the journaling of our data. I think is something that we spend too little time on.
Yeah.
So that, whether it's ransomware or some other failure, that we're able to kind of roll back in time in production arrays or on disks to the last known good instance. And that,
Yeah,
data,
like a rollback essentially.
yeah.
Yeah, and I've
Yeah.
seen that's not a common control out there from what I've seen, but I'm seeing some like in the EDR, MDR, XDR, that endpoint protection space.
Mhm.
That's a control that I'm starting to see built into some of those tools.
So I'm going at this more from like the enterprise system route. I'm going to assume that if you're like to this level of sophistication about ransomware, you're not using your laptop as your storage repository.
Right.
Like, so if you get ransomware on your laptop, like disconnect it from the network and follow your forensics. I'm thinking more of like encrypting data as like, this is my VMware data store, or this is my pure storage arrays, etc. Am I thinking about that the wrong way?
Yes, I think you are.
Okay.
Like I hear you of like when we think about like when we think about what's the real impact of this encrypt data thing, that that certainly, we're thinking about like the enterprise data, and in particular things that are out on file sharers, or we're locking up databases and enterprise applications. But I wouldn't minimize the impact that those same ransomware incidents have on the individual workstations, and that once those things are hit, there's a pretty profound, like, just take the machine offline is its own kind of problem of like, not only do I have to run this enormous exercise to try to restore, recover, rebuild all my applications and sort of like data center systems, but the impact on workstations.
If you had to tackle one, like the enterprise system, like I gave you some limited resources and I said, like, you can spend this on, integrity control for your workstation or for your corporate file stores. Like where do you start?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you in that. I would hope in most organizations that the bulk of the impact is centrally in applications and, data. I'm using that very broadly. Applications and databases and core, what we would think of as data center or IT.
Core assets, yeah.
Yeah. But, and so, yes, I'll grant you, it would probably prioritize that higher. But again, when you're in a big incident like this, you end up having to do, but if you were able to restore all of your systems, all of your data center systems, but your endpoints and access systems were still compromised. And I've been in the middle of incidents like that before of, we think the data center is, is fine or contained, but we can't, like, we can trust the computing environment even less than we normally would.
Both then in your mind.
Yeah, then I would tell you practically end up in the same place, which is,
got it.
I got to do this massive restore. And those things are, especially right now, are dispersed.
I think you're more benevolent towards the end users than I might be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the old, these systems would work so well. My data center would function so well if it wasn't for all these users.
Okay, I have one more note that I put.
Cool.
As a control around encrypting data. Now, I don't know. I want to love this one, but I'm not sure if I should.
Okay.
Data inventory.
Forbidden love.
Forbidden love. Yeah, don't judge me. But data inventory. Like, do we have, not even necessarily getting to classification yet, but do we know where all of our data lives? And, because I don't see anything around like asset management, asset inventory. Like those are controls that we need. Obviously, like NIST and,
Right.
MITRE ATT&CK framework like covers those as really important parts. And even places that are good at maybe hardware inventory are less good at software inventory and even less good at data inventory.
Yeah.
But if I were worried about this asset being encrypted, I would want like a solid inventory of what lives where and how is it being protected. And so as a control that I would want to see put in place against encrypt data is a solid inventory.
Yeah, and this to me, I could see it there, and there are a whole set of, that's probably next for me on this is just stepping back and looking at the whole thing again and saying, we had a little bit of, some nitpicks here and there overall.
Yeah, maybe I'm being too nitpicky about it.
Well, no, and it's not that it's nitpicky. It's that to me, that inventory, and also your comment before about misconfiguration, and I would group inventory controls and potential misconfigurations. Yeah, I don't know if this is, according to Hoyle, the right way to think about it, but I would think about those as sort of hygiene, governance practices. I think there's a view missing of sort of the do the right thing stuff that underlies all of this, which is, I think, poor inventory controls and poor, maybe not strictly speaking an exploiting a vulnerability, but just bad hygiene and bad configuration or misconfiguration, I think underlies all of these things too. Like malicious document, I put in that category. They had this very specific, weird, disable macros is a thing, but that's almost like in the world we live in, it almost feels like misconfiguration to me.
To me, that goes under like a security configuration management.
Yeah.
Or administration. And that's one of the configurations I would want to maintain is disabling macros, but there's so many more that we'd want to see there as well. So I almost want to like replace that control with just either, cloud security posture management or security configuration management, just generally, and that being one attribute there.
Or minimum security baselines, or whatever you want to call those things. Just starting with not having default configurations, but having thoughtful, secure by design kinds of configurations for things is kind of important.
But one thing I do want to say is like I have admitted the fact that not everybody likes cybersecurity as much as we do. Nor do they want to get to that level of minutia. And if it's like, oh, okay, well, I've got 20 laptops in my small company, like, let's just go around and disable macros. We're not going to put Wazoo in with positive control and, security configuration management. I see the point that they're making of
correct.
Like just at a minimum, do this piece of it. And so
100%. And I would agree. This specific disable macros things, again, I remember this from incidents I've worked on in places before now, where you look back and say, man, if we just had macros turned off, specifically here, we're talking about Office macros inside of Word, Excel.
So would you say this is the minimum people should have put in place for a ransomware incident?
Minimum. I love the question. Yeah, I mean, I think of going back to what started this whole premise is, there's secure information security or cybersecurity at large, and there are all sorts of strategies you can, there are all sorts of, what am I looking for? Frameworks on how to establish your cybersecurity strategy with capitalized letters on cybersecurity strategy, formalized, and that presumes to me in a lot of organizations that you have a cybersecurity team, that you have, some sort of leadership, or executive, leading that team. And again, that's just not the reality of many, SMB or even mid-sized organizations. And I think our premise was, if you go back to this life cycle of ransomware, it's like we can get so lost in big cybersecurity strategy that we lose focus on the things that are specific to ransomware incidents. And if we were to focus more on that, you would have less risk of chasing things that aren't your most important thing. And for most organizations, ransomware is the most important thing, which is...
It is. Well, for pretty much everybody, it's the most important thing.
So after that long-winded preamble, I'm going to say, I think, yes.
I think this is the minimum.
I think this is the minimum.
And if we talk about some use case, I'd like to make like one point about this, and then talk about how should people be using this in their, like, as an effective tool. When we talk about, implementing these types of controls in an environment, I think this can be really helpful in like really solid, just basic practices, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to go buy a new technology to disable macros or buy a widget to follow a least privileged model. There's great free or cheap MFA solutions that can be put in place, depending on the size of your organization. And one of my pet peeves, right, we both work as advisors for organizations that are on a security journey, is there's always like this, what's the new shiny tool that we're going to buy? And like, if you have, a $50K budget or a $500K or a $5 million
what's
budget,
the new Gartner 4-letter acronym?
What's the 4-letter acronym I have to buy, or this new like real intense sounding tool that's AI based? Like, you're going to get a lot more mileage out of your money if you're just following these basic practices. And if I'm going to say, you might disagree with this. If you don't have this in place, you don't need to worry about buying like the newest machine learning based cyber defense tool. Like, you just got to get some of these best practices, and a lot of them are free or cheap. So we have like 1 minute left, but talk to me about, like, if you were a practitioner today, like, how would you use this? Holding your managed service provider accountable for these, communicating to executives? Like, what would you do with it?
Well, to me, I think it's as basic as, I think this is a really good way to assess your organization. I mean, I would just simply look through this and, and especially this version with the hexagons on it, I would go through and say, am I doing these? And it requires a little bit of explanation and blowout of those things to say, am I doing them? Like, okay, I have logs.
But do I have it here?
Yeah. Do I have it implemented in a place that is, valid, that where I'm A, collecting the data that I need to collect, and B, somebody's paying attention to it, and C, it's tuned to see this specific, people trying to cycle valid credentials, or that sort of thing.
And whether you're asking yourself the question, or maybe you're an IT executive and you have a managed security service provider, or contractors that are doing work for you, or employees and you're not as technical, I think this is a great diagram to bring up and say, hey, tell me how we do network segmentation right here in our environment, or tell me how we do logging and alerting on our internet exposed services. And I think just asking those questions and making sure that there's a good plan in place for doing that is going to go a really long way.
I'm going to say something in the similar, but in a reverse direction that might be even a little controversial, hopefully thought provoking,
Hmm.
which is if we agree and you agree that ransomware is the most significant risk in your organization, and most people I talk to
It's true.
feel that ransomware is the most significant. If there are things on this life cycle flowchart that you aren't doing, but you're doing other things that cost you time,
And
talent, and treasure in your security program,
you're probably wrong.
It's hard for me to say across the board that's the wrong thing to be doing. But what I think I can say is you should really think about that. Of if there's something on this that you aren't doing, and there's something else you're spending money and time and focus on, and maybe a lot of money, time, and focus to the expense of.
I guess I'll leave a lot of the stuff we have on here can be free or cheap if you do it the right way versus blowing big money on special tools. But
yeah,
okay, dude, we've burned our time.
We absolutely have.
Well, I have a new fun topic for us for next week.
Do you? Well, we have a special guest coming next week.
Then for the following week.
Yeah, so you're in 2 weeks. Hold that thought. I'd love to hear. You tell me what are 2 weeks. We'll do it in reverse chronological order. In 2 weeks, what do you want to talk about?
I'm not going to tell you. It's
not going to tell. All right. Well, we're going to have the first time. We're going to have a special guest, a third wheel, as it were, in our treehouse next week, and it is going to be super cool. One of my favorite people in the world, and somebody who is an absolute expert in tracking cyber criminals through Bitcoin transactions.
Can you make sure that he wears a Hawaiian shirt?
I can ask, but he has a mind of his own, so right. We'll see how it goes. But cool. That will be a super cool discussion next week.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Take care, man.
Yep.